Hey y'all, it's me, Kevvie. Last year, I, in my drag history reading series, made a video about Alexandra Billings, reading about her from the book Jim Flint, The Boy from Peoria by Tracy Baim and Owen Keehnen. Well, since then, Alexandra Billings has published her memoir, so I have much more to share about her. This time for me came out April 1st, and in the course of the month, I read it twice. Once as an ebook and once as an audiobook. I could not pass up the opportunity to hear Alex speak for 14 hours. Oh, it was so good. If you need a refresher on Alexandra Billings, she is a trans legend. She started out as a little trans kid right down the street from where I grew up, and then began her transition and performing career as a female impersonator in the great city of Chicago. After performing at the Baton as Shantae, she transitioned into being a theater actor and eventually made her way to television and Broadway. She had a major part on Transparent as Maura's best friend Davina. She has a recurring role on The Connors as Darlene and Becky's boss Robin. And not only was she on Broadway, but she starred as Madame Morrible in Wicked. You have just got to stand. This time for me uses the Wizard of Oz as a motif throughout the memoir. This is fitting not just because of her role in Wicked, but because for many queer people, the Wizard of Oz was a huge cornerstone of our culture. You may have heard the expression friend of Dorothy, which was code that gays used to find each other when they couldn't speak frankly. Are you a friend of Dorothy? Judy Garland and her ruby slippers and her quirky cast of queer companions are ingrained in our culture and our identities. So it's only fitting that Alex used that film to help structure the narrative. There are so many wonderful stories in here. Alex as a child, not understanding why she's different, just knowing she loved to wear her mother's dresses. Her childhood and finding community through theater. Learning about transsexuals and female impersonators. And then immediately becoming a queer fixture in Chicago's nightlife. Getting married. Twice. Becoming an educator and seeking higher education to be the best damn teacher that she could be. But this book also has some painful stories. Alex being homeless, being attacked as a sex worker, and of course, the AIDS genocide. Knowing that she's HIV positive and that she lived through that time, I knew it was going to be a subject in her memoir, but I still just wasn't prepared for it when it happened. I just have a really hard time reading or watching AIDS stories. I can't watch Rent or Paris is Burning without sobbing just the whole time. Our community was decimated. So many queer people are dead, and because of that, so much of our history is lost. And so much of what could have been was stolen from us. Never able to happen because our people were dying and Reagan was glad. He didn't do a damn thing. So stories about this subject, they hurt. I spent that chapter just crying in the shower, listening to her recount all of her friends dying, and the fear she felt that she would catch it and suffer the same way they did. It's tragic, but it's a part of our history, and I'm so glad that Alex shared her history with us so that her friends like Dan, Daphne, Ben, Ginger Spice, and so on, they can be remembered. I want to share with you two of my favorite monologues from this book. The first is spoken by Billings to her brother Bobby. They are on a plane to visit their mother, who is in the hospital and not expected to make it. While Alex is reading up on Nancy Reagan in anticipation of playing her on stage, her brother says to her that Nancy Reagan was actually a pretty great guy, because she stood by her man. And this is her response. I want you to look at me, Bobby. Turn your fucking head and look at me. Do you see this? This is the face of AIDS. Do you know that? I am your sister, and I am not an idiot, or a child, or your punching bag, or your gopher, or your steward, or your pacifier, when your emotional life turns into that red-hot rage we both inherited. I am not afraid of you, or your temper, or your idiotic tantrums. I am your family, and we are on our way to see our mother, who may or may not wake up again, and you want to sit here on a plane and argue about a bunch of people who I happen to know were solely responsible for murdering every single one of my fucking friends. I am your family. I want to love you. I want to hang out with you, and all I've ever wanted was to be with you. And sometimes be just like you. And you've hated me ever since I can remember, and now is no different. Have you ever seen anyone die of AIDS, Bobby? Have you ever walked into a house so stinking of feces and cat piss that you could throw up before you get to the hallway? Do you know that's probably going to happen to me? And do you know that it will happen to me because of people like the Reagans who won't say a word? They want us all dead. And the reason she stood by her man was because she had no voice and no other way to wield her bigotry and hatred of queers except by manipulating her husband, whose meticulous plans turned out to be my community's worst nightmare. Stand by her man. She stood by while this fascist American traitor wreaked havoc upon a tribe of humans by ignoring the virus that's eventually going to kill not only everyone I know, but everyone you know as well. I'm sitting right next to you, Bobby, and I have AIDS. Look at me. Fucking turn your head and see me for once. Stop being such a coward. But I said nothing. He turned his head and took a nap. And I clutched my book and wept, quietly, so I wouldn't wake him. The next monologue comes from when she had an audition for the show Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David. She shows up to the audition and learns she's auditioning for the following scene. You are a trans woman at a restaurant. The line for the ladies' room is exceedingly long, and you really have to pee. You decide to make a quick entrance into the men's room. Larry and you have a conversation at the urinal. I hope you can all understand why this isn't okay, and you understand why Alex was outraged. Her initial reaction was to just walk out, just not audition at all. But then she had a better idea, to go into the audition and tell them why this was wrong. She walks in, addresses Larry, and says, "Let me tell you why this isn't funny. This isn't funny because what you're doing is perpetuating a stereotype that trans women are an idea rather than a protected class of people. By having a scene with a trans woman standing up and peeing, you reduce us to the lowest common denominator, our genitals. And that is not who we are. That is who you think we are. This promotes the dangerous notion that because we might be dudes in dresses, that men who love us need to do it in secret, because people like you might think that they are fags. This in turn might cause them to think twice about us, and fearing public shaming and humiliation might make them want to come after us and, I don't know, shoot us in the head. Or push us off a building, or do what happened to a girlfriend of mine in the late 80s. Chop her into tiny pieces, stuff her in a suitcase, and throw her remains off a bridge. And I could forgive all that. I might be able to look past your blatant transphobia and the intentional cruelty of using us as your personal punchline if your bit were funny. But it isn't funny. Because it isn't true. I began my transition in 1980, and I've waited in a million lines with a million other women, and never once did I jump ship so I could stand next to some dude in a 3-piece suit and pee into an oblong ceramic mini slide. I never had to go quite that badly. I hate to sound like Uta Hagen here, but comedy comes from the truth. And this is not only unfunny, it's a goddamn lie. Thank you, Mr. David, for being so kind and allowing me to speak. And have a great rest of your season. Now, if you've watched the show, you may not remember this scene, and that's because they pulled it. Of course, we don't know definitively if her speech was the reason it got axed, but I'd like to think it contributed a good deal. You can see from these two passages how poignant and articulate her writing is, and oh, I just love it. There's so many delightful references in this book, mostly to classic Hollywood stars and films. I've already mentioned The Wizard of Oz, but there's also a good bit about Alice in Wonderland. There's even a reference to the camp classic The Mirror Cracked, an Agatha Christie adaptation starring Elizabeth Taylor, Kim Novak, and Angela Lansbury. Lola dear, there are really only two things I dislike about you. Your face. Oh my gosh, that film is a romp. And if you haven't seen it yet, I suggest you do so immediately. It is a favorite of mine, and it was a swell surprise to find it right here in this excellent book. One more aspect of this book that makes it so special are the occasional God Talks chapters, in which Alex and God have a conversation. These were sentimental exchanges full of important advice for wherever Alex was on her journey. For example, when she's a teenager full of hormones and sex drive, she complains about wanting to have sex with everybody, and how everyone and her mother have told her it's wrong. God responds, "Who doesn't? I wouldn't just go around having sex with absolutely everyone, but it's fine to want to. There's nothing wrong with desire. Most everyone wants to have sex with everyone else. They just don't go around doing it. You're gonna want to be close to whomever you love. You're gonna want to lie down with the people who see you, who trust you, and who share in the same silliness and laughter and beauty as you. Just be careful and treat the people you sleep with the way you want to be treated." Oh, moments like this were just magical. Excellent advice for queer teens. The God Talks chapters were sparse but beloved. Alexandra Billings is one of my favorite people on the planet, and this time for me affirmed those feelings. In fact, I'd say it made them deeper and richer. This is a hell of a book, and I really want you to pick it up and give it a read, and hopefully cherish it as much as I do. Are you planning to read this time for me? Do you have recommendations for other trans memoirs I should pick up? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if it pleases and sparkles, I'll see you in the next video. Mwah!